What were some of the things that you seen in prison? What's some of the horror stories you seen in prison?
Man, I've seen people get raped. I've seen men, like 6 men, like lions, attack a man, and all of them take turns raping the man. I've seen stabbings. I've seen people take hot water with, oh man, Vaseline and throw it on people and burn their skin off. I've seen feces fights. People with bottles of feces throwing them at each other. Man. Because guess what? You could be in Iraq tomorrow. You could be in here with me. And for the record, what people don't know have happened in here with me, for 6 days, I've laid in a bed, naked, strapped to a bed. Only thing I could move was my mouth and my toes, and I could wiggle my fingers. They strapped me to a bed. I've been starved for 3 days. They treated me so bad, and I was, oh my goodness, to tell you the story. It's stabbings, CO assaults, 2 years in the hole. I didn't see a human face for 2 years of my life. It was so bad, I asked my mother to send me a picture of the tree, and I still got the picture. The last time I touched grass, I can't even tell you. It was bad. I don't want to feel like crying right now, but it was bad.
Big body sitting on chrome. 96 big body sitting on chrome. 96 big body sitting on chrome. 96 big body sitting on chrome.
When I see cases like this, I start to think about the Central Park Five. I start to think about how blacks and Hispanics, young black and Hispanic men, are demonized, villainized before the court can even process the evidence. How do you get over murder, let alone murder of a young child? How do you accept a plea deal knowing that you didn't commit any crime or have any involvement? And how do you live your life after that? Who's going to hire you? Who's going to accept you? How do you move on? So, brother, I would like you to introduce yourself, state your name, and who you is.
Darak Big Yehuda. Know you about Darak Big Yehuda. That's my name, man.
Lord, yeah. And let me ask you a question. So, how long have you been locked down?
12 years.
12 years, all right. And what were you falsely accused of?
I was accused of first-degree murder. I was accused of first-degree murder.
First-degree murder.
In the state of Pennsylvania.
Got you. And do you feel that the reputation of Israel caused the court or the jury to have the wrong perception of you?
Yes. When you look at my affidavit, Hebrew Israelite is thrown all over it. When you in court and they bring up, what Hebrew Israelites are, and say, well, I must be guilty because this is how they speak. This is who they are. Yes, it played a very big part. Me being an Israelite, it was the only thing that really, my character was never a problem. I've never been locked up. I never had no criminal background.
Right.
The only thing that made me look bad character-wise was the fact that I was a born and raised Hebrew Israelite.
Well, since you got there, let's talk about you. You were sentenced to life without parole,
Yes.
simply for not testifying against someone.
Yes.
Do you feel that that was a just judgment for someone who has no record, no prior convictions, no criminal background?
No, not at all. They offered me a deal. I was offered a deal to go home many a times, just for exchange to lock up my co-defendant. And when I didn't do that, that's when they turned the tables on me, and it wasn't justifiable because one, they're not saying in the state of Pennsylvania, they have a rule called exclusive custody.
Right.
And in exclusive custody, they're not necessarily saying you did it, but the fact that you was around or could have done it, they'll hit you with that. And that's when they hit me with exclusive custody after I refused to take a deal. And that's why they try to do the death penalty. I was on death row for about a year, and then from there, that's when the life in prison came into play.
Wow. So do you consider yourself a political prisoner?
Yes, I do, 100%.
We know that in Ephesians, it says that Paul, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1, Paul was speaking to the church, and he said that he was a prisoner for Yahushua, or Jesus Christ. Do you consider yourself a spiritual prisoner at this point?
Yes, 100%. 100%. When your belief is the reason why you're in prison, when they bringing up detectives who studied Hebrew Israelites and they playing these things in the courtroom, this is how I believe. Yes, I am 100%. But this is prophesied. It's in the scripture that the Messiah said, "You will be thrown in prison falsely for my name's sake." I mean, that's just written.
And the time is short, and the time is at hand. Before we start getting into your accusations and how we got to this point, I want to ask one more question. What is some of the ministry work that you have done in prison?
In here?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, man. I mean, there's a bunch of Israelites, people who have awakened to their true identity, who was once Muslims, Jehovah's Witness, just pure atheists, who are now strong brothers in this way of life, man, who have shaken off the dust of their paganistic ways, and now they're following the laws of the Most High.
Right. So do you feel like this was all done by Yehovah, that he chose to put you in this position to specifically reach souls that was in prison?
Yes, I mean, if you look at the story with Joseph told his brothers, what you meant for evil, the Most High meant for good. So sometimes we may not understand the plan, but it's all part of the Most High's plan. You know, had the brothers not been jealous of Joseph, he would have never been sold into Egypt. If he would never sold into Egypt, he never would have heard the dream of the baker and the butler. If he never would have heard their dreams, it never would have got to Pharaoh. If it never would have got to Pharaoh, Joseph would not have been able to tell Pharaoh his dream, which saved Egypt, in return brought the brothers down into Egypt to be saved. And at the end of the day, all things was because the Most High ordained it. Sometimes the Most High have a plan and we don't know it.
Right.
We just got to still serve through it all.
And I just want to go a little bit into your family history and your family background, right? So give us a brief summary of your family history in regards to the Hebrew Israelite movement.
Well, my whole family been Israelites since I've known. My grandmother and grandfather, Rabbi and Mother Bradshaw, which I don't necessarily use the term rabbi, but they were my grandfather came under Rabbi Matthews and stuff. This is, you're talking way back in the 1800s. My family has been in this way of life. It goes way back. It started with the Tabernacle of Israel, and then when they split up and broke, that's when my grandfather started the House of Israel and brought forth my other grandfather, my great grandfather, Rabbi Marshall Witter, or Rabbi Moshe. and they had the 7 priests there. That's when they started the House of Israel. So we have been. I mean, I've been in this like this family tree go back into the 1800s.
Right. So was it your grandfather?
If you had a book of records.
Right. So was it your grandfather or your great grandfather who was involved in the Marcus Garvey movement?
It was my great grandfather.
Your great grandfather who?
Jamaica.
Which was who? What was his name?
Which was from Jamaica, Rabbi Marshall.
Rabbi Marshall. He was involved in the Marcus Garvey movement. So your family been dealing with the truth since the 1800s. And who was your grandfather again?
Rabbi Brashua.
And what was his involvement?
We refer to him as Priest Obi.
Okay.
I like to use the word rabbi. I don't necessarily like the term rabbi.
I understand. And it's all in the spirit of Hamashiach, Right. These are things that were said in the gospel, so I can understand why you don't like to use that term anymore, because the truth is never ending, it's always evolving. So we may have came up one way and then we learn more and more truth as we advance, right?
Right.
What was Abba Bibbin's connection to your family's ministry?
Well, they came up under my grandfather with the Rabbi Matthews movement. That's where Bibbins came into play, and that's where he started the branch now that people refer to as One West. I don't like to say One West because there's different doctrine. People have different, but the whole One West movement came through Bibbins, and Bibbins came from under my grandfather.
Okay, all praises. So he definitely dealt with your grandfather on a major level before starting what people like to call the One Western movement today, right? All praises to the Most High. So your family have a lot of strong ties. So being born into the truth, what was it like being raised in this way of life?
Oh man, as a kid it was the worst because you couldn't. No TV on the show. My grandfather was the strictest Israelite you probably met I've ever met in my life. Even down to your clothes. He was Israelite police. Your clothing had to be 100%. If you was a woman, you couldn't even come in his house if you had pants on. He was strict, man. My grandfather was strict. No television watching on the Shabbat. None of that. Everything was Torah, and Yeshua. There was no middle ground.
Right.
And I was growing up, of course, we was wearing yarmulkes at the time. You couldn't pray, walk around the house without one. It was strict, man. The woman had their head coverings. It was the worst. But it was a blessing. But at the time, being an Israelite, living in that household, that was no cable. He didn't want no Western society poisoning your brain. We didn't watch certain things, so we were real strict, and we lived right over the Knesset. So where we worshiped at, we lived right over it. So we had to pray with him. He had sunrise prayer. When you come home from school, afternoon prayer, nighttime prayer. So you knew Hebrew, you knew all of that stuff, which he said that's your reasonable service, is to serve the Most High, not to be a football player, basketball player. So he didn't care about that. His main focus was your salvation. Right. And I love him for that. As I got older, but when I was a kid,
Yeah, right. So now with that being said, being born into this truth, your family having so many strong ties in this truth, you witnessed a lot of things, you witnessed a lot of different movements within the Hebrew Israelite culture. And what is your thoughts on those who try to take this truth, manipulate it, and make it into a cult-like fashion?
Well, when I think of it, I think it's wrong, because at the end of the day, this is not your word. The scripture says, let the word of God be right and every man a liar. When you start adding your own belief, doctrines, or feelings to what the Most High said, it's no longer his word.
Right.
There's no any change from perfection is called imperfection. If it's perfect, it's supposed to be left alone.
Exactly.
So when you start adding something to something that's perfect, it's no longer perfect. It's now tainted.
And this is not to throw any shots at any Israelite community, but what is your perception on people like Yahweh Ben Yahweh, Mosley, and people who took part in the Jersey City shooting recently?
Well, this is what I say with them. I mean, yeah, it's wrong. They what they're doing. I mean, the books tells us as brothers. I mean, we say. I mean, the scripture does tell us you should love your neighbor as yourself and don't bear no grudge against my people. But it's kind of hard because they do give Israelites a bad name, and we can't erase that. I would just encourage brothers to still pray for them and try to, work with them to some degree if they allow it. But it is bad. I don't agree with it because the book says that in Proverbs 14:12, there's a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end of is the ways of death. So when you start adding a cult-like atmosphere to this truth, it's no longer the truth. You are now distorting it and making people believe this is what Israelites think. And the reality is it is not. We have many forms of Israelites who don't do nothing like that, and it will never be displayed because this is what they're seeing. And the media loves to project us as negative because they know who we are.
Right.
So if they can do anything that can take our message, that's what they're going to do. To make it look bad, that's what they will do. And they have done it.
Right. These people
I
are
just
doing
recently had a talk with somebody, and they were referring to the Hebrew Israelites and what happened in, I believe that was Washington, with the Native Americans, and they say how Hebrew Israelites is a hate group and this and that. But I say, if you want to go to a hate group, let's talk about the Klan, who are Christians, who proclaim Christianity and kill, rape, and did all sorts of stuff to our people. But yet, their religion don't get thrown up there. I was told by a Christian, well, that's not being a real Christian. Well, I can tell you what you seeing in New Jersey ain't being a real Israelite, but you don't want to hear that.
Right, exactly.
But you can't show me in the Quran where it says you're supposed to blow up buildings and do this and that. If you, every group, I don't care who it is always going to have radicals and people who want to distort it for their own benefit and pleasure. That's just life. Right.
So with that being said, considering your views and how strongly you feel and against our people who are in that mentality doing those things, but at the same time still praying for our people and hoping that they come into repentance, how did we get to where you at now? How did you get to this situation? Let's start from the beginning. Let's start to the woman you was dealing with. How did you meet her?
Well, I met her growing up in school. Those of y'all who may not know, I am from Brooklyn. I'm from Flatbush, Brooklyn.
Right.
That's where I was born. That's where I was raised up my whole life. Well, I met her. She lived about 2 blocks from me. I know her family. She, when she was younger, she had issues. And, being the man, when you see a woman who tell you her father did, certain things to her, and you witness your mother on drugs, and it's late and you don't want to go home, she got to hang around you. You begin to gravitate to her and, care about her. I just think as being a man, that's just in our just DNA, I believe. And being, knowing her, going to school with her, being around her, I started teaching her the truth. She came into this way of life. She been in this way of life. So, I mean, that's how I met her and have known her.
So you actually have a long history with her then?
Yes, we have a very, very long history. Yes.
So I'm gonna bring something up, right? I remember when I first met you in this truth. When I first met you, you had real strong views about the scriptures, and there was a lot of things I agreed with you on. And if you remember, at the time, I was celibate, going on 5 years at that time, right? And brothers were trying to give me an arranged marriage and everything. I know you remember that, But I was celibate because I was that true to the word, and I really want to make sure I was with the right person. And I remember at the time, you were a virgin, right? And and you know, and I'm bringing it up because in the world, people think that that's funny and they make fun of it. But when you read the scriptures, that's something to actually applaud and be proud about. You know, so I remember you being very, very serious about before laying with a woman, making sure that that woman was going to be your wife because you wanted to make sure y'all was one with the scriptures. So, being that your relationship involves the accusations that's against you, so what happened? How did y'all ended up getting into a relationship?
Well, what happened was, after years went past, I met back up with her. You know, she came back to New York. You know, we went out a couple times, and we decided to, you know, get back into a relationship. What I didn't know is that during the time that I did not see her, I never knew there was a lot of baggage that has accumulated over the years,
Right.
consisting of being kicked out of the military for selling guns, taking people's IDs and doing fraud with it, helping a man break out of federal prison, and murders that came up with guns. These are things that I never knew. I mean, I never knew none of these things. And it's so crazy. Some of the stuff I found out was during trial. I'm like certain things I found out during trial. I'm not trying to make light of no one passing away, but you know, selling guns with your military ID with this guy and shooting. One day when I found out that it got real was one of my friends passed away. His name was Waji. Actually, my son after him. He passed away, got hit by a car. His funeral, I'm not too sure when it was, exactly the month, but that same day, the U.S. Marshals came to my house, and I was getting ready. I opened the door, and here come U.S. Marshals. Like, what's going on? And they said, well, we'd rather speak with her, if you don't mind. She wasn't there, so when she got there, I'm like, yo, what's going on? There's U.S. Marshals at the door, and lo and behold, they was there, they spoke, and I was shocked to hear what I heard. That at this time she's pregnant, and as a man, you don't want to give your woman over to the system, you know what I mean? It's like, what do you do? Like,
So she was pregnant with your child?
Yeah, and at this time, you know, the guns that she sold came back with her registered to her, and there was, you know, murders in it. So I'm like, what? Like,
so you was
just confused.
So you fell in love with her due to your childhood relationship, and when you finally got together in a relationship with her, like an actual relationship with her, how long were you actually together at that point?
Oh, from that point?
Yeah.
I would say close to a year. I would say close to a year. About that.
Close to a year.
If I could remember, I would say close to a year.
And this woman already had a child before you got back with her, right?
Yes.
So then let's rewind a little bit. How did you get accused of the murder of her child?
Well, they accused me because they try to hit me with the time of death, exclusive custody, basically stating that you didn't do nothing to stop it. So as a result, criminal negligence come in at basically stating that you didn't do nothing to stop it. So as a result, criminal negligence come in at you get charged.
Well, let's rewind a little bit more. Let's talk about that day. What happened at the time of this woman's child death, the death of this woman's child?
Well, that's when what was seen happened. She was abusive in the morning, and that's just what happened. She was abusive. I intercede. She left out.
So
I proceeded to go to.
So now I got it. So pretty much you intervened in between the situation that you did view as abusive, right?
Say it again.
So pretty much you intervened in a situation that you yourself did deem as abusive.
Yes.
And then what happened at that point?
Well, at that point, I went to the hospital. Something that no guilty man would do. If I'm guilty and I'm wrong,
Right.
why would I go to a hospital?
So you went to the hospital, or you took the girl to the hospital?
Yeah, I went to the hospital. I went to the hospital. With no hesitation, I went to the hospital. Which puzzled the police. They said, well, damn, why didn't you go to the hospital? That night in the precinct, they even asked that. They was like, wow, well, you came here. And I went there. They questioned me. Nothing. They even said it. Nothing was suspicious. The only thing suspicious was her.
So you took her daughter to the hospital, and
yes, it was me. It was me. And this is what people's like, how? Like, wow, whoa.
Right.
You didn't know that. It was me.
So,
I was the one that did it.
So you intervened in a situation, and you seen that it was a problem, and at the moment you seen a situation that genuinely looked at or appeared to be abuse to you, you intervened and took the girl to the hospital, and the girl passed away, correct?
Right.
Right. So now at that point, so now let's talk about how your case was mishandled, because at this point you should have been looked at as someone who attempted to be a hero, right? But
well, at the time I was, and this is what a lot of some people know it. At the time I was viewed as a hero. They was looking at her from the jump, because what most people don't know is that she already had child abuse in her history. Her children actually wasn't supposed to be with her to begin with. Her mother, when she got locked up before for child abuse and negligence, see, these are things that I never knew. Her mother just gave her back the kids.
Right.
And she took it from there.
So,
she took them out the system. The mother, gave her back her kids, which she wasn't supposed to do.
So
Darak
Darak,
a long history of it.
So long story short, what made them begin to look at you as the problem?
Well, when I didn't accept their deal, they was telling me, well, here go a deal for this. You could go home, time served, if you would speak about her. They told me, they sat down in a room with me and said, this girl is guilty, man. The injuries predate you. There's injuries that has happened to the victim that predates you. You wasn't there. There's no way in the world you could have done this if you came around this time.
So in order to prove your innocence in regards to this case, because they already looked at medical records and could tell that there's been abuse going on for years, long before you was involved in a relationship with this woman, correct? In order for your case to be proven, we have to get just a medical specialist involved, correct?
You need a medical specialist.
Right.
Already, there has been several medical experts who indicated that I should not be in jail, and that included her own medical expert who her lawyer got. So Dr. Martin was his name. Actually, he was the one who her family went and got to see what happened and indicated that this girl was guilty.
What's the name of the anthropologist that we're trying to get on board for your case?
It's a pathologist. His name is Dr. Cyril Weck. Dr. Cyril, Cyril Weck.
And what does it?
He is the world-renowned medical expert who has agreed to take my case.
Great. And what does it take to get him on board?
$5,000.
$5,000. So, audience, you hear it for yourself. You're hearing the story. If you could please donate to the GoFundMe in reference to this brother cause to be able to get the.
And remember, Israelites, Hebrew Israelite lives matter as well.
That's right. So if you could donate to the GoFundMe to get this medical specialist involved to be able to further prove his innocence, it will be a great help. This brother is serving life without parole, no prior convictions, no criminal background whatsoever. But everyone else involved in this case has a background that could be involved in it. So please donate to the GoFundMe, and it will be listed attached to this video. Shalom.
96 big body sitting on chrome. 96 big body sitting on chrome. 96 big body sitting on chrome.
Somebody wake me, I'm dreaming.